Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Shooting the Shelf here on the Just Shelve channel. I'm Jesse Arnold, and with me is my ever faithful co-host, Curtis Ackerman. How's it going, Curtis?
It is going excellent. Good morning, Jesse.
Fantastic. Yes, I am in a different place. I don't have my Christmas lights up. I feel completely weird, and the kitchen light is blinking over here, and it's probably going to send me into some sort of fit at some point during the show. So
It looks like
that
you're
said,
laying on a picnic table right now.
no, I am. I'm dog sitting for my DM. He and his wife and their boys are on like a family camping trip in Canada this week. So I'm watching their dog, staying at their house, and that is just their plaid curtain for their porch. So
Nice.
yes, so I'll hopefully be back in my normal Christmas light room with all my action figures around me, because I also have no action figures around here. It's just like live, laugh, love kind of stuff on the wall, and that's not me.
You've spent quite a bit of time away from your home this week
Yes.
after the wonderful Jubilee Day.
But hey, Monkey King arrived on Jubilee Day, and my
it was
shirt
the best
and
Jubilee
a
Day
package,
ever.
and it was the best because I didn't have to go anywhere near any of that stuff once I left in the morning. So, all
You know,
right.
when you
Well,
first said it was Jubilee Day, I really honestly thought that it was like the X-Men character, like it was like a celebration. Because there's like they do that thing in like Metropolis, Illinois for Superman, and I know there's a couple places across the country where that. And I was like, I don't know, maybe in the comics she's from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, and so they have a Jubilee X-Men Day. So
no, it's been going on for like 100 years, but that's not why anybody's here. People are here tonight because, which a quick shout out to everyone in the chat. We see you all out there. We got Dave Orkin, Star, Nate Strong, Joe Gonzalez, Steph Orkin, Dave Orkin, I already said that, Eddie, Carlo. I look normal in plaid. I normally wear plaid. It's just too hot to wear two shirts anymore right now. But that said,
he didn't want to have double plaid with the background and his shirt.
Well,
so.
yeah, that too. JG's out there. But we've got a very special guest tonight. I mean, all our guests are special, but we've got one of the actual artists, painters from the Four Horsemen studios, the one and only Cameron Smith. Welcome to the shelf, Cameron.
Hey, guys.
Oh, I didn't say it. I'm totally out of my element.
Warm digital welcome.
Yeah.
How's it going, Cameron?
Things are great, thanks.
Beautiful. Well, we appreciate you being on. We were just kind of talking before we went live here, and I got to spend a little time with you at intern this past year, and I was like, man, this guy's a wealth of knowledge, and just knew we had to get you on the show. So I appreciate you making time in your schedule. I know things are kind of hectic right now with everything you guys got going on, so appreciate you showing up.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yep, no problem. Jesse, you ready to go right into shelf selections?
Yeah, let's get into the selections, man.
All right. And Cameron, as we go through here, if you have any comments on them, feel free to shout them out. The first one is my selection, and this is from Nate Strong, who's with us in chat. Nate's been putting out a bunch of great toy photography recently, and I loved this one. You got Attila getting ready for battle. His one of his soldiers is handing him his helmet as he's already mounted up and ready to head out. And then, like Nate does a lot of times, he also gives you another photo where he kind of backs up and you can see his whole setting and how he lit that shot, which I think is a really cool thing for photographers to do, to kind of give you, some of that insight on how they got that picture. So just love this one. It's really awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. I do like seeing these behind the scene posts where you can see the background and everything and the setup, and just like the little side pieces he's got all around it to do the bounce back on the light and everything is just really cool. Just that getting the helmet handed up to him. It's such an epic shot.
Yeah, you see all like the bounce cards and stuff, and then it's like like you realize from where that shot was taken, like he just had that little sliver of space between the cards and stuff to take that shot. But then when you look at the shot, you don't see any of that other stuff, the bounce cards, the lights, whatever. It just looked perfect. So
I love seeing stuff like this because, when we have it in the studio while we're working on it, it's either literally in pieces or very static. So when I get to see it with dramatic lighting in some creative context, as I tell Trevor when he sends us back our photos, for each new release, like, you guys make our stuff look good.
yeah. And I love the way that Mythic Legion, and there's a reason why so many toy photographers use Mythic Legions, because it looks so realistic. And I know there's the whole camp out there of people that want all these, double jointed articulation and all this kind of stuff. But you can't beat like the hidden joints and armor, layered armor look to create that realism. Because I mean, this just looks like a real shot. It looks like it could be out of a movie. So yeah, I really love that. The next one is Jesse's, and Jesse, your camera went off. I'm not sure if you're still there with us.
I don't know if you can still hear me.
Can barely hear you.
Oh yeah, because I walked away from my mic.
Oh, okay. So this one is Jesse's. Looks like we got a little G.I. Joe Transformer combo.
Yeah. I mean, two things I love. I mean, G.I. Joe, I've never been as into as Transformers, but I always liked them as a kid. I really like the Classified series, and just seeing that in scale with, I'm assuming that's a one of the Masterpiece Optimuses of some sort. If someone else knows what that is, please feel free to correct me. But I love that, especially after that comic came out last week or this week, Void Rivals, where it's kind of reintroducing a shared Transformers G.I. Joe universe.
Yeah, I have not seen that Optimus before. That thing looks pretty dang cool. It's like just that in of itself is pretty awesome. But yeah, I love the total shot they got here with the, you've got the bricks, and then you got some looks like rusted out barrels and stuff, and then you were telling me about that comic that just came out. So I think this was the first thing when I saw this. I was like, oh, that's, they must have been reading that comic and decided to throw this photo together. So, but yeah, that's really awesome, Optimus. And this is, what is it? Jim Z Fave Figs?
Jim's Fave Figs.
Yep. Jim's Fave Figs. Yep. Gotcha. Next one is from me. This is D Amazing. After he was on Legion's Lounge last week, I just felt like, kind of going through some of his Instagram, and I saw some really great shots. Here were just two that I picked out. Obviously, I've been huge fan of the Mafex line recently. So you got the Mafex Nightwing there doing kind of a double foot stomp on the Man Bat. And then you've got the over in the other corner, you got I believe that's the Ben Reilly Spider-Man kind of getting attacked. And that, just that cool shot with those crates and stuff. So
I like whatever that compressed air tank or whatever that is in that other shot with Toxin and stuff. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
These are really cool. There's some really dynamic poses going on here. There's a lot of motion in these shots. It's fun to see.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting, like, especially when these toy photographers get these kind of shots and you don't see any wires or stands or anything holding them up. And I know a lot of times they'll either Photoshop that out or kind of hide it in certain spots, but it's just really cool. So next one is Jesse again.
Yep. So this one is from, I don't know if I'm going to say this right. I'm just going to say it in is bland American English. Gregory Betonier from Mythic Legion's Cabal. Of course, been seeing tons of Monkey King pictures since this week. Everybody started getting them, and it's just cool seeing the variety of poses and different shots people are getting, which we'll definitely talk about Monkey King here in a little bit once we're done with the selections. But I I just really loved that kind of running pose and the way he's got the soft goods flared out and the Arctic mission Storm Shadow there in the front from the Classified series. Again, it's outdoors and it's got the effects in it, so it's like all the stuff I love seeing in photos. So.
Do you see a comment from Trevor out here about the no stands and stuff? He says that it's magic. So I do want to thank Trevor. He helped me this weekend. I was trying to get a shot right. I had picked up some custom heads from JCM Custom Paints on Instagram. He does amazing paint jobs over there in Europe. And they finally came in because it takes a little bit, with shipping and everything. And so Trevor helped me out with a shot, and afterwards he, told me that it looked good, and then he told me to stay in my lane. So appreciate it, Trevor. But yeah, this is a great shot. I do love that kind of running, especially the action poses and stuff that with these Monkey King shots that people have been getting. It's just such a great figure. I mean, all the parts, like just standing in one place, it looks great, but all these action shots and, the one that Trevor got, jumping down from the trees and running and all this kind of stuff just looks great. It's just an amazing figure. So
Totally agree.
Next one, I put this in here for Jesse. This is Darth Primus. And they recreated the classic scene from X-Men, the animated series. And I thought I had to throw this out here. So, Jesse, okay. I've been eagerly awaiting all week your thoughts on this recreation.
I mean, you know how I feel about the animated series, so I'm kind of meh about it. No,
I know.
It's a great shot.
It's one of these where I know your feelings on the animated series, but I also know your feelings on Rogue, so I was interested to see where you would fall on this one.
I'm going to be completely honest. I have no memory of this sequence until it became a meme in the last year or two, or that I was aware of the meme. I have no memory of this scene from the show, but the shot is great. I love that he's got Apocalypse in a slightly more dynamic pose. The backdrop is awesome. I like the ruins and stuff. I mean, as far as recreating a scene from a comic or a cartoon, they really nailed the pose and the angle and everything.
And Joe says Monkey King isn't the only figure to come with a peach. So there you go.
I don't know what that means.
I do love in the shot. I love the background, the sky, the way that's lit. I really can't tell if that's like a monitor in the background, like Trevor does sometimes, or if that's actual natural sky in the background. But either way, it looks really cool. And then I love the rubble and debris that, just kind of the small details that are in the picture as well. And then obviously the rumpus area is nice and front and center. So
the lineup of the paint on the suit throws that whole thing off for me. So.
Gotcha. So they need to
with that thigh swivel, and the cartoon takes it right out because there's no way she's running around in heels. I've always hated superheroes in high heels. So,
okay, all right, Cameron, any thoughts on this recreation?
I mean, it's clearly recognizable as the source material. Did a great job of capturing the feel of the original. But beyond that. Nope.
The one thing I would say about this, Jesse, I'll give you, with what you're saying about the Rogue figure, we do need a better Rogue figure, whether it's Mezco or Mafex. I mean, I appreciate what we get from Marvel Legends for the price point, but I'm ready for a more expensive, nicer Rogue figure from somebody. So
I used to appreciate the price point. I don't so much anymore.
Here's yours, Jesse.
Yes, Alex Barrios in Mythic Legion's Cabal. This is his second full custom, and I just thought it was really cool. I mean, gotta love the critters, and just seeing it on a full height 1.0 scale figure is really fun. And I think they did an excellent job on the paint on the head, and I like all the little details and the fur piece and everything. I think it was a fun custom. And again, it just always when things make me stop and really look at it, that's usually what gets my picks for the week. So I just run out at 4 because space.
Yeah. I for your second full custom, this looks really awesome. I don't know that white would be the color that I would try to tackle that early, but he nailed it. It looks good. I know it just takes a lot of layers, a lot of patience. But he nailed it there. Love all the touches with like the rivets and everything, which is something, we always say for, people that want to get into customizing or are afraid that they can't do it or they're not talented enough. Start with some of those details that are already in the sculpt. Just paint some rivets, paint some belts. Those things do not take a lot of work, but they can make a big difference in the figure. So start with those things, because in this one here, all those little details pop. So good job.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at this one, and actually what's drawing my attention is the paint rack to the left of the photo.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, okay, yeah, he's got the Vallejo paints, he's got the washes, and it's a pretty good setup there. Like, you can see my setup here right over my shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
I've got the spinners, and that's the desk where I do my own work at home. So yeah, I just that's where my attention is. It's like, okay, now I want to see more of the rack. Show me what else you have there.
Right.
And I want to see your brushes and your other stuff.
Yeah, I was kind of looking at that myself. So, all right. This is my next one. This is ostentatious toy photography. And this is using one of those fountains from Alexander Deshaw, Drunk Gizmo Customs. And I just thought the shot was really cool. He's, kind of got the one knee propped up, and he's just kind of hanging out at the fountain. Moose is in the background, just sitting there waiting for his rider to come back to him. And he's just kind of in a pondering pose. He's, so I don't know. There's something very serene about this picture.
No, yeah. I mean, I can totally hear the nature sounds out there and just feel the breeze and the sun and everything. Yeah, they captured this moment great. Like with the alder being back there in the shadows of the tree and stuff, just looks really nice. Yeah, it was a great shot.
All right. Next one. This is Jesse.
I mean, it's a Balrog that looks like it's actually on fire. I mean, I believe these are Joy Toy or Warhammer or something. I'm not 100%.
I think you're
they're
correct.
Joy Toy Warhammer.
They're the Joy Toy Warhammer. Yeah. Yeah. It looks like we got on the left. There's looks like a Chaos Terminator, and that's a Sister of Battle in the foreground, and it looks like a Deathcore of Krieg in his hand, and I can't tell who's on the ground.
There's a couple bodies on the ground there. It looks like some wire to look like a roll of barbed wire or something. But yeah, I just the chaos of this shot. I know those are like 1/18 scale, I think. The Warhammer figures, and I'm not sure how big that Balrog is. I'm not sure which one that is, but yeah, it's just
now
amazing.
Does the Balrog come with like a flame effect on top, or is that all like added effect to the photo?
I mean, I think there is like a sculpted, like semi-translucent, like flame effect, like some of the Marvel Legends type stuff. Is the first thing I can grasp, but I think that has definitely been enhanced a little bit, at least.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's a cool shot. A lot going on here to digest, but and I'm not familiar with the source material, but just looking at it, it just looks really cool. So, and I think that's it. Yep.
There we go.
Shelf selections. So, move things around, and all right, we're back. So, good stuff. Well, Cameron, once again, thanks for being on. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Like you're obviously working for Horsemen right now. Were you into toy collecting, or either as a kid or as an adult? Is that something that you've been into?
As a kid, yeah, of course. I loved toys, and then as an adult, you got into them and out of them, and into them and out of them. Most of my own collecting is more wargaming and role playing miniatures, your Warhammer stuff, your Dungeons and Dragons type stuff, and that kind of thing, and the occasional toy lately, because I was really collecting toys heavily in the 90s, I guess, and I was running out of space so quickly, and money as well, that I just had to kind of pare down and focus on my main stuff. But I've always been buying toy here, a toy there, some comics, other fandom stuff. It's always present.
And what about the art background? Is that something that started with painting like D&D miniatures, or was there something else that brought that on?
With the painting, it really was D&D miniatures. I guess it was around 1979 or 80. I started painting those, at the local model shop with the testers enamels, because those were the only things available at the time. So I've been painting since then, but most of it, I guess, self-taught. But a lot of time, paying attention to what other people were doing, and I mean, at the time, there were newsletters, obviously pre-internet, but we had collectors clubs for like the Ral Partha miniatures and Grenadier miniatures, and they would come with instructions on how to use how to put a wash on a model, or how to dry brush something, and color selection and all that kind of stuff. So I picked up a lot of it by doing stuff, and also paying attention to what else was going on in the fine scale modeling hobby. I have very little in the way of formal art education. Nothing past high school as far as art. So
cool. And then, like, as far as D&D goes, like, I know nothing. So I know Jesse's a big D&D guy. Like, are you currently in a campaign? Do you have a group that you do Dungeons and Dragons with currently, or is that something that, like, you want to talk about any of your experience with that in the past?
Oh geez, yeah. Like I said, I started D&D around 79 or 80 with the Holmes box set. It's still on my shelf back here somewhere.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I think it's all washed out because of my light back here. My room's not really set up for the best video effects, but it's back there, and that absolutely informed my sense of aesthetics, my appreciation of the kind of fantasy art that led me to the toy world and all that kind of stuff. So any of that stuff, the D&D, the old Ray Harryhausen stop motion movies, Star Wars, all the normal pop culture hits, I was there for it, and all kind of led to where I am now.
That's
nice.
Awesome. Is that a mace on your wall back there? Or no, that's Gimli's axe, isn't it?
That's Gimli's axe, yeah.
Okay.
I do have a replica 15th century flanged mace around here, but it's actually not in this room. But yeah.
Okay.
And there's medieval armor and weapons kind of floating around the house here and there.
As one does.
Very cool.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I've done various kinds of historical reenactment and stuff over the years, and the medieval ancient periods which is usually a huge swath of time anyway, but really my my focus. So yeah, occasionally when I find a cool weapon or piece of armor or something like that, it'll find its way into the house.
So what kind of like class or type of characters do you enjoy, whether it was with the role playing or D&D or whatever?
I'm usually the GM. That's my thing is, I mean, I'll play anything, but my preferred role is sitting behind that DM screen and being a storyteller and being part of the communal story building that hobby is really geared towards. I mean, yeah, I could talk the entire night tonight if you just want to talk about like RPGs and the history of RPGs, but that's been my hobby for forever. But yeah, for me, it's a communal storytelling thing, and being able to take a group of players and kind of guide them through an adventure or a whole campaign or a series of campaigns or whatever is really enjoyable.
Very cool.
It's been a challenge since the pandemic. I think anybody who's done role playing before that, the pandemic changed everything, and that's when we went to formats like this, like a Zoom format or something. People using virtual tabletops. We couldn't meet in person. We couldn't leave our houses, but we could still meet in a medium like this and still tell that collective story together. And it's since things have opened up again, some people are going back to playing in person, some are sticking to this kind of format, and it's kind of this weird transitional period for how people socialize around the games and around the table.
Yeah, it's interesting how the pandemic changed a lot in terms of technology and how we communicate with each other. I know, like me and my job, I started once the pandemic started. They basically made my job a work from home job. And so all the meetings that I would typically have in person became like, it was Microsoft Teams, but it's basically like Zoom meetings. And that's like all we do now. And I know I've heard Jesse talk about, there's a setup because he's been trying to get like a Mythic Legion D&D game together. And I guess there's a setup where you can kind of do a board on the computer and kind of get everybody together and kind of do that stuff. So yeah, it sounds like that, changed a little bit as we've gone through this.
Yeah. Have you had any luck getting a Mythic Legions, RPG together? Because that's something that I would love to do, and I would love to see like way above my pay grade, but I would love to see a Mythos RPG. That would be cool.
I've been thinking about it, but with doing the customizing and painting, and I'm working on a book that I'm trying to rewrite and edit and everything. I don't want to take away from those things to start. I mean, I want to do the campaign. I've thrown around some ideas like giving fuzz monks like the feigned death feature. It's just like a racial thing. Just a couple things to incorporate the unique elements of Mythic Legions into the already established, kind of 5e setting and everything, and then just build the story around the lore that we have.
Yeah.
But I haven't actively done too much with it yet. But I will eventually.
I can't remember who it was. There was someone in the Mythic Legions Cabal, and this is probably going back 6 months, unless maybe it's a year and a half. And I don't know. I'm old. I forget stuff. But it was a while ago. Somebody took like photos of the some of the Mythic Legions toys and paired them with stats for 5th edition D&D. So it's like, yeah, here's Alithia, and here's her stats, her class level, her
nice.
Attributes, all that. So, someone did that. I know someone probably in the chat or in the Cabal notes or remembers. But yeah, it was cool to see, the crossover with the toys and the gaming.
Now
the only thing I've
go ahead, Jesse.
The only thing I've actively done at this point is I went through all the bios and I wrote down on a spreadsheet like every like role like the characters have, or like their job, like defender, guardian, gladiator, like all those different things, and broke them down into the classic, like the 5e basic categories. And I rolled a character on the Mythic Minute that I do Thursday nights in the Cabal, where I just did a roll on screen and then built a figure based off the stat rolls and everything. And, did like random parts ended up making like a female dwarf, I think was what it came down to. But yeah, it was fun. But yeah.
Well, this might get a little spoilery. So if you can't answer, Cameron, that's fine. But I do know it was like last year sometime. You guys showed some really small characters, like a small version of Kurzog and some other figures and people immediately were like, oh my gosh, this is, Mythic Legion miniatures. And, they're going to have some sort of board game, role-playing game. Is that was that just for fun? Is there something that we should draw from that? Are there conclusions that we should be drawing?
It was for sure being done as a proof of concept, and those minis they're about 28 millimeter scale, so about in scale with Dungeons and Dragons, Warhammer stuff, and they're still on the shelf right next to my desk in the studio. But they were definitely done at the time as proof of concept, because it's something that, if you've been to like a show where we had those out with us, or to an intern for a day kind of thing, we're talking about them. It's something that, on the whole that is interesting, and we'd like to explore it. But that's about as far as it's gone to date. There's so much stuff in the calendar already. It's getting it to that proof of concept in that stage is about as far as it's gotten at the moment.
Gotcha.
I mean, I hope to see something with it in the future, because obviously my hobby is the primarily the miniatures and the gaming. So I would love to see that crossover. But will something happen with it? I hope so, but remains to be seen.
It was pretty fun over the course of that weekend, though. An intern seeing that small, tiny Kurzog, and then you go to the hotel and you see the giant freaking Kurzog. It's like it almost made it look even bigger, because we saw the tiny D&D looking one. You're a Miniatura. Okay. There you go. Now you guys got a name for the line.
Fantastic.
Yeah, mythic minis. Yeah, Joe just said that.
Gotcha. So tell us a little bit about your work history, because obviously we know you're painting for the studio now, but you haven't always been. So
Nope.
kind of what were you doing before, and how did that lead up to where you're working now?
Man, I have had such a bizarre work history to get where I am. So I started with the studio just before the pandemic, like literally like weeks before the pandemic hit. So that gives you, a moment in time when I started just actually, like freelancing and part-timing with Four Horsemen. But I've had a lot of jobs and even a couple of careers. So when I started, I was still actually a history professor up at William Patterson University, not too far from the studio, about 20 minutes away. I was just an adjunct professor, teaching a couple of classes a semester, ancient and medieval, survey courses in world history. And I had started doing that after I got out of grad school, which I went to after retiring from the Army, and then trying a kind of mundane civilian job that didn't really work out for me. And I was like, maybe I can go back to school. So spent a couple of years getting my master's in history, and then that in itself was cool. I got to go to grad school full time for 2 years as an adult. I was in my 40s and got to go back to school and be in this really cool environment with other grad students. And I was like older than some of my professors, but but it was really nice. And then I got to go. I spent a couple of summers over in Europe working on my thesis, and also doing presentations at medieval history conferences, different places in the U.S. and then over in Europe. So I was really pursuing the whole academia thing. The pandemic really hit that hard, but in an extreme, bit of luck, I wound up landing it at Four Horsemen just at the time the academia was getting really kind of dicey.
Well, and that's really where I want to go to next, because I heard this story at intern on how you landed at Four Horsemen, and it just blew my mind. So do you mind sharing that story with our audience on how you ended up at Four Horsemen Studios?
Not at all. By the way, I would respond to some of the chats, but I don't know this format, by the way, and I don't think I can type in there. But to respond to a couple of questions, I was a 19 kilo. I was an armor crewman, and spent some time as a tank commander and that kind of stuff. Yes, I do 40K and Warhammer and all kinds of other stuff. But the way I actually wound up at Four Horsemen was back when I was in the Army. I was full time in the National Guard, not too far from here. I was a training and readiness NCO for a while for an armor company and then for a cavalry troop. But I ran into folks from McFarlane Toys at if anybody's from the area, the Chiller Theater Expo, like a horror movie convention comes around twice a year, and I ran into guys from McFarlane, and I thought, wow, I'm getting ready to get out of the Army. Maybe this would be a cool job. So I managed to get some freelancing gigs there. So I would take leave from the Army, like vacation time. And during that time, I would freelance for McFarlane. And that worked out pretty well, but it kind of fell by the wayside. But then, fast forward a few years, I'm done with the Army. I was done with grad school, and I was at the Dunkin' Donuts. It's around the corner from my house, and it's also around the corner from Horsemen studio, because I live almost next to the studio. And there's a guy in front of me online, and he's wearing a Four Horsemen t-shirt. And I was like, oh yeah, Four Horsemen. I know of those guys. I'm like, I used to work for McFarlane. And he's like, oh, I work for Four Horsemen. And it was Bill Mancuso, and that's how we met. And he was like, dude, if you're looking for work, stop by. So between semesters in early 2019, when I was waiting for the spring semester to pop up, I needed some work. So I just kind of poked my head in Four Horsemen around the corner, and I ran into Jim was there. I had never met Jim. He didn't know me from Adam, but I said, hey, look, I ran into Bill. I'm a painter. I used to work at McFarlane. I need some work if you have something. And he was like, oh yeah. Well, we have stuff coming up. We'll probably call you in a couple of weeks. And I said, okay. Then I got home and the phone rang, and he's like, yeah, can you come in? I was like, yeah, you want me in the morning? He's like, no, can you come in like now? I was like, give me 20 minutes. So incredibly fortunate, to run into Bill, and then to have Jim be so gracious as to give me a shot, right away. And as it turned out, it was a really good fit. And here I am. Every day I'm just thankful that that just worked out. I mean, I laid the groundwork for it by setting myself up with in the industry with McFarlane and stuff, but never dreamed that it would have worked out as well as it has. So every day I'm thankful that it landed me here.
That's
so
awesome.
any
of you out there that think that being at Four Horsemen would be your dream job, you just need to go to Dunkin' Donuts. And who knows, maybe you'll have that lucky chance encounter. Now the one thing I because some people were talking about that story at intern, and I was like, that's just an amazing chain of events that would lead to you guys being there at the same time. And then I found out that pretty much at any time of the day that you stop by Dunkin' Donuts, there's a good chance that Bill will be there anyway. So it wasn't.
Yeah. I ran into him there actually on a number of occasions, because my schedule when I was working as a history professor was kind of open. I was at the campus a couple days a week and working from home a couple days a week, so always running back and forth to the Dunkin' Donuts. So yeah, ran into him quite a few times.
That's just just really awesome how that turned out, and you ended up landing there.
Yeah.
So from working and painting on miniatures and then going to like 1/12 size figures, like what things transitioned easy, like what type of skills, what things might have been easier or harder, like did you enjoy it more or less? Like, can you talk about that transition?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually kind of concerned at first when I started freelancing McFarlane about transferring the painting skills I had, which if people have painted miniatures, it can be a very specific way you approach a model. And also when you change scales, the way color is perceived is a bit different. So the smaller in scale you go, the darker things tend to look. So you have to kind of lighten things up. And also with the, with 28 millimeter scale, I kind of think about it like stage makeup. you have to exaggerate things, or they get lost because the scale is so small. So when I started doing like the 1/12 scale stuff, and I even did some 1/6 ups when I was at McFarland, we were still working pre-digital then, so you're working on 2-up prototypes rather than the 1-to-1 scale prototypes we have now. I did have to adjust a bit the way I did things like highlighting or shading and but not as much as I expected. Like once you can lay a color down and play with a little highlighter shade, the technique is much the same. The tools are much the same. What I find is most applicable is the composition. When you look at a figural thing, whether it's like a statue or a miniature or a toy or something, knowing how you're going to apply color to it to bring the eye to the points of interest where you want them to, vary the light and dark tones, the warm and cool tones, that kind of thing, so that you wind up with something aesthetically pleasing. Those principles are all the same and really central to making something look good. Everybody knows there's color combinations that we normally see, right? You'll see a blue and yellow together, or a red and black together, and understanding, some color theory and how and why that stuff works together and what those rules are, and then learning to break them and keep it interesting. I used an example at the Intern for a Day. Like one of my favorite examples is like, you don't see red and purple together because it's a jarring combination and it's unpleasant, but it works really well on Magneto. When you see that supervillain costume, part of what makes you uneasy is the fact that those colors kind of clash. They don't go together. If he were blue and yellow or something typically aesthetically pleasing like that, it wouldn't be as good a villain costume as something that's that intentionally goes against the grain and looks kind of off to the eye. That's
some
one
emotion in the color right off the bat. I had started with like some smaller type figures too, and then when I got into Mythic Legion, obviously that's 1/12 scale, and I think there were certain things like, for me, like doing details like eyes were much easier because I'm used to dealing with something so small. So, when you've got, like a 1/12 scale, it's like, okay, this isn't so bad. But the thing that I struggle with the most was having large flat surfaces, because in a miniature, like there's not many large flat surfaces. Everything is just so crunched down that there's a lot of detail and curves and all this kind of stuff. So trying to get a nice even like coat or a layering or even blending, like doing some blending and stuff, was where I kind of struggled initially. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but that's how I found it.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we deal with the Mythic stuff all the time, especially something like all the Knights and Templars and stuff we've put out lately. Is there are real large areas on those toys where it's just a flat color or a flat surface, and how do you make that visually interesting and not make it look unfinished, which is really easy to do, especially in 1/12 scale. If you're looking at like a mostly plain pauldron or something, well, how do you bring some visual interest to that without losing the lines of the sculpt? And it's stuff that it's when you're looking at the toy, you probably don't notice it, nor should you really. You just look at it and go, oh wow, that's cool, that works. But if we messed it up or it didn't work right, you'd have a toy and go, man, it's okay, but there's either something missing or it doesn't hang together right. So there's different ways to deal with like those large surfaces. depending on the toy. Sometimes it's a, subtle shading or a highlighting or just making sure, the color is really smooth. It, depends on the individual toy. There's so much variation.
Well, speaking of individual toy, I just found out right before we went live here that you ended up painting this Monkey King here.
Yep.
And I'm looking at this, and there are very few flat surfaces here. There's a lot of detail in this.
Yeah.
So
I think that's probably my favorite thing I've ever painted for Four Horsemen, because as a painter, the challenges there were so interesting and so fun to work on. But like those gold pauldrons, they look like a single gold pauldron, but going in there and picking out with a wash and some dry brushing, all that texture that Eric sculpted in there was a lot of fun. And there's so many different areas on, and I'm looking here at the Monkey King on the screen in front of me. There's so many different areas of interest on the figure, and there's so many different textures and shapes and like sizes of, like the breastplate is kind of broken down into smaller pieces, but the pauldrons are these really large pieces, but they have these small tassets on the end. It was a challenge to make it all hang together, and I hope it looks cohesive, in like a single figure. So like putting together the color palette, with guidance from Eric Treadaway was a lot of fun. And getting to see it come together, because I'm painting it in pieces, and as I paint a piece, and we're kind of like holding it together in the tray to see how it looks together as a single composition was a lot of fun, and there was so much to play around with on this figure as a painter, that it was really, really satisfying to see the final product.
Yeah, it absolutely came out amazing. I absolutely love it. Like Trevor's photos did it justice, because Trevor's photos on this one specifically were amazing. The one coming out of the tree, the one with the moon behind him. But there's something when you get it in your hand and you can see all the detail that is sculpted in this thing, it's even better. It has, like the shoes, the pauldrons, like everything on this thing is just so good. I love the way that faceplate technology works for the different faces and stuff.
Yeah.
The whole thing is really cool.
Like the shoes you mentioned, for example, were something that actually took quite a while, because Eric was using as reference not only visual stuff but descriptions of the shoes from the original story Journey to the West, the story of the Monkey King, and the shoes are described as it's like, oh, okay, we got to use some purple on these shoes, and how do we work that into the rest? And I think they went through probably 2 or 3 different iterations where I was trying out color combinations and applications that just didn't work that well, until we found this one where it's like, oh yeah, that works. And it may be one of those things that seems really minor, especially people using the monkey feet instead of the shoe feet on there anyway. But for me, that's one of the satisfying things about getting to work on a project like this is being able to go in and fiddle with those details to make sure it's just right and it works.
Well, go ahead, Jesse.
I was gonna say the shoes are great. I think the thing that I love the most on this figure, details wise, I mean all the sculpting and stuff, but I love the face paint on the two alternate ones. I just like it gives kind of that mandrel almost vibe to it. I just think that's a really nice touch, where it's such a minor application as far as like size on the piece. It's just that bit across the face, but it adds such a different element to it. It's amazing.
Those were actually based on Chinese opera masks. So if you like Google, Chinese opera mask for the Monkey King or Sun Wukong or stuff, you'll come up with those kind of red, white, and black designs. And there's some variations on them, but that was the inspiration for that. And Eric and I were going over some of the opera masks that were out there, and he came up with this particular pattern to put on the more organic looking sculpted face, as opposed to like a very a flat kind of static opera mask. But that's straight where that came from. And those painted faces are my favorite on the toy as well.
Yeah, they look awesome. One of the things that I was really impressed with at Intern, we went and did our session with Eric, and he was kind of doing the sculpting and stuff, and sometimes he would add some colors to it, and he would say, he would throw some colors that, just kind of his idea of what it might look like. But then when it got to you guys, he said, you guys have the autonomy to kind of go a different direction and try some other colors and test it out. If you think something's going to look better, to kind of have some creativity to it. And then when I was in your session with you, you kind of talked a little bit more about that, about, just kind of testing different things and seeing what works with a figure like this that has some historic nature to it. And you're doing research and trying to get it right. How does that work in terms of still trying to be creative and all that versus getting it right for the story?
We started from a point where, Eric and I actually spent some time talking about this, because he would give me color renders. So we had some basic idea of where we're going to go with it. Like, he knew he wanted the armor in gold, and the soft goods we knew were going to be, this bright red. So whatever else we did had to work with that. But we looked at all kinds of previous versions of the Monkey King, a lot from Asian sources and older sources. Say, what's the traditional take on this character? How can we stay true to that and still make it kind of our own? So we wanted to make sure that we captured the feel of it, properly and respectfully, because it is such an established character, important in the culture it's from. We didn't want to, inadvertently disrespect the kind of cultural heritage it carries with it. So we had a lot of guidance from old sources for that kind of thing, and then I would play around with things like getting the gold tone right, because at this point, there's actually on the wall, and this is a project Bill was working on right in the studio. There's this just swatch of like 8 or 9 different gold tones that we have the Pantones written down for. And, this is this color and that's that color, because you think, oh, it's metallic gold. But it's like, well, do we want something that looks more antiqued, or do we want something that looks more coppery? Or, there's so many fine tuning things. And again, you might not notice, you pick it up and go, oh, that's gold. But the impression it gives, or the story it tells, can change with subtle variations. So there was some experimenting around, and the phoenix feathers, another example that he has on his headdress, or an example of that too, where I was messing around with some of the old sources and trying some swatches and seeing what Eric liked and what worked and what didn't work. And we wound up using some color shift paint, kind of this iridescent effect on it, because we wanted to make sure, hey, these are phoenix feathers. They have to look magical, not like they came off like as exotic as like a peacock feather is. That's not what this is. This is its own thing. How do we communicate that? So
I love with the gold, like, it doesn't feel like the same gold on like the new Attila, or like I with your history knowledge and the background and the different, like, with armor and all that sort of thing, like, I feel like I'm trying to think of, like, when I've seen in museums or different things displays of Chinese or Asian artifacts, like, that gold looks, there's a different look in I don't mean flavor, because I'm not going around licking stuff in the museum, but like flavor
that's frowned upon.
The way that gold looks compared to like European gold, like, you know, it's still the same material, but the way they worked it, the way they handled it, you know, how battle worn or exposed to the elements it is, make differences and stuff. And like this just feels like someone went into a a Chinese museum, was like that put it on a figure and shrunk it down. You know, it's really impressive.
You really nailed it.
Thanks. I'm like I said, I think it's my favorite thing I've ever painted for the studio, and I'm really happy with the way it came out, and you know, the factory reproduced the colors on the prototype just perfectly. So
one of the other things I am big in myself real quick, because I just love this, and I didn't notice it beforehand, but this blue on the belt, it's not going to show up on this right here on camera, but there's like all kinds of different tones in that blue. Like, it's not just one color all the way through. I don't know what you guys did with that, but it is absolutely stunning.
Thanks. As I recall, that was a wash. You know, I set down a base coat. There was so much texture that Eric sculpted into it. I put a wash on there to pull out the deeper recesses. That probably did like an easy, you know, delicate dry brush over the top to bring that base color back. But
Gotcha.
I remember playing with these blues that I wanted them a little green in there, a little more turquoise, a little more mineral or natural dye, you know.
It's absolutely beautiful. It's weird because, and we've talked about this on this show before, but it's like I'm sitting here looking, because the figure's facing this way, and I'm looking at the back of it, and this is the part of the figure that typically most people aren't going to see, because it's going to be facing the back of their displays. But there's so much work put in the back of this figure that it's like it's just amazing that you've got the details all the way around on here. The amount of things that have been painted on this. You guys spared no expense on this thing. So, yeah, really cool.
And there's such a variety of color too. Like, I mean, there's the green, the whites, the purples, and the beads around the necklaces, and like the gourds and the different elements, the accessories. It's just, and they all fit. They might not necessarily always visually go together, but because they're like things he's added on, but they all still fit into the overall look. It's just really, really impressive. Like, there is not a boring piece. Not that I'm saying Mythic Legions or Cosmic Legions are boring, but like there is nothing on this figure that you look at and you just like gloss over. Like, there's, every time you look at it, it's like new stuff to see.
Yeah, it's a work of art for sure.
One of our concerns actually was, as we had so many different components, is like, oh man, is this going to be too busy? Are we going to have to go in and like simplify this visually and you know, make sure the paint is a little more basic? And fortunately, the answer was no. Everything, you know, happily worked out.
I'll be honest, when the other face is on here with the closed mouth and then no face paint, I do feel like the details kind of overshadow it. But when you put this face on with the open mouth and those, you know, the fangs hanging out, and then you've got that like war paint on it or whatever, like, dude, like your eyes go right to that face. So yeah, no, with this look here, for sure, it does not. It's just an amazing figure. So
thanks. And yeah, that was something we were actually aware of in the studio too. Is that I think you're right, when you put the closed mouth with the no paint face on there, it does change the way you know, your eye moves around the toy. But we also knew, hey, people can take the shoulder pads off. They can you know, use the simpler headdress without the feathers. You know, add and take off soft goods and stuff. So there are some looks that are a little more stripped down, that, you know, if you want more of a savage kind of Monkey King, I think that the paint with, or the face without the paint, works better in the overall composition. But I agree. I think when you have all the bits and bobs on it, that the painted face is the best compliment for it.
Well, and then I love the fact that, like, you get done, you know, with you open it up, you put your version of the Monkey King together that you want, and then you've got these extra parts, and it's like, so like I use the shoes, so I've got a extra set of feet, I got a bunch of extra hands, I got extra heads. So now I can throw a whole other character together. Like I can take anybody. I grabbed a Sir Gerard, but you can just throw that stuff on there, and now you've got an extra monkey. So just the amount of value for this figure is just so good. Couldn't be more impressed.
And I have to say, as far as like the customizing and stuff, the guy in the studio who is like the most dialed in with that is Joe Vasapolo, because he does his own customizing and such. So he is so aware of custom possibilities and stuff. As soon as we get the pieces off the printer and the prototype stuff, when he has the time, he's messing around and playing, oh, look, I can do this, look, I can do that, this other thing. And it's wound up, sometimes changing or adding the accessories that come with the figure, because some of the stuff that Joe does, and Eric or someone will look at it and go, oh, that's really cool, we need to put that in the package.
Joe's always looking out for us, especially for the dwarf guys. He's always got their back, I know. This question came from Kevin. Do you check out any of the customs either on the Cabal or anywhere else on a regular basis? And have you ever taken inspiration from other people who work on customs?
I do go on both the Cabals. I'm pretty quiet there, but I kind of lurk them both a lot, and I love to see what people are doing and what they come up with. And I absolutely do take inspiration for the way people use parts or use colors or things to tell a story visually with the figure. I don't think that there's anything that I've like directly like said, oh yeah, I need to do that, because usually when I get something, I'll get a tray of parts, and usually 4 or 5 different flat pieces of art, printouts from Eric. So I already have a lot of direction, or he's got a really tight vision of where he wants to see things go when he's sculpting it. So while I do have a lot of freedom to interpret and change what he's given me, that's really the starting point, because what I get is so comprehensive to begin with.
Gotcha.
What?
Go ahead, Jesse.
Did you get to see the I believe it was at ToyCon New Jersey last week, the Wolf King table with Nate Armstrong did the Sir Hiss?
No, I didn't see that one.
He used like arms and torsos and stuff and made the snake, and he used like the pauldrons to be like his collar piece and everything. It was like there's a lot of people do some creative stuff between that, and then he did the caterpillar for the Alice in Wonderland at ZoloCon. Like he's just doing some crazy stuff, putting parts together that is just like, I never would have thought of that, but then you see it, it's like, oh yeah.
Yeah, it was like a set of legs and a torso, or set of legs and a hip piece attached to another set of legs and a hip piece attached to another set, and then it just and it went all the way up, and then it had torso on top of torso on top of torso. It's like, man, yeah, some really creative stuff.
Yeah. I don't make it to as many toy shows as like Joe or like Diego do. They're out at a lot of them. I think Cookie goes to a lot of them as well. I don't make it to that many, but when I do, I always like looking at the customs, because the in-house lines, or Mythic and Cosmic, have such a not narrowly defined, but such a well-defined look that I'm working within those parameters, so I get to see stuff out at the toy shows that is stuff that we just wouldn't do in the studio. That is people take the core designs that are coming out of Eric's brain primarily, and putting your own spin on it, and it's so cool to see stuff like that. I'd like to see that Sir Hiss. If someone could, put a link in the comments or point me to the Cabal or something, I want to take a look at that. But yeah, like the chances of something like just like that coming out of the studio, who knows? But the freedom that people have to express their take on the Legion stuff differently is really cool to see. And I can tell you for sure, we look at that stuff in the studio and really dig it. It's always cool to see what people are coming up with.
That's cool.
Well, I know, just from our conversation at Intern, you seemed very excited for the Figura Obscura line based on your historic background and just like not only the figures that were out at the time when we talked, but the possibility of what kind of cool creations could be coming from that. Is that your favorite line to work on?
It really is. Because I think again, it's because like when you look at the Mythic Legion stuff, even though there's huge variation within the line, it is a tightly defined look. Where the Figura Obscura, I don't know what's coming next until it shows up on the desk. Like I didn't know there was going to be a Monkey King until the parts showed up. So that was really cool. So the fact that we have these things like the Headless Horseman and a Krampus and this really traditional looking Father Christmas with all the heavy soft goods on it and the Monkey King. There's so much stuff. Like I don't know what to expect, and the influences are from all over. Mm-hmm. So it's always exciting to see what's coming up next with Figura Obscura, and I'm trying not to like accidentally say anything that like it's easy to forget because like we work so far in advance. It's like, oh wait a minute, this thing I worked on last year, has that even been announced yet? But yeah, there's of course always cool stuff in the pipeline, and there's a couple of things that Sherry worked on for Figura Obscura that I have in mind that I'm looking forward to getting out in the world, because it's cool stuff. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, is that using arm or leg armor as like the body of the snake?
Yep. Arms and legs.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And a little bit of torso in the middle.
Yeah, some down here, a little torso.
With the scarf on, is that inspired from Ka from the Jungle Book? The hat and the
it's Sir Hiss from it's the Disney Robin Hood animated.
Right.
Where it was the
fox. That's what I was thinking. You're right. Because Ka doesn't have any kind of clothing, right?
Yeah. So he's got that little like shoulder shawl thing, and then he's got the friar tuck back there. He's got the vultures. Yep. He's got like the whole crew done up. He resculpted one of the I think it was the Egalis head. He did as the rooster, as the bard.
Yeah. He's been coming up with some really creative stuff. I
love seeing that, because again, like the chances that in the studio we're going to officially release a snake with arm and leg parts as the body are probably pretty slim. But seeing that, it looks great, and it's really cool that what a setup. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So that's kind of the Robin Hood setup, and then he did the Alice in Wonderland this past year. So yeah, he's been putting out some really creative things.
And a whole Winnie the Pooh set.
Yeah.
Speaking of history, correct me if I'm wrong. Did you get attributed to some of the new weapon styles that they introduced in the Necronominus wave, like the new hammers, the more kind of realistic looking scale ones?
No, I think that was all Eric, but I mean, it may have come back to some conversations we had because,
okay.
I was a history professor. Medieval is my focus, and actually back, a long time ago, it was more than 30 years ago now. I actually, as my profession, I was an armorer, so I was recreating medieval and Renaissance arms and armor, mostly armor, occasional weapons. So I have a pretty good knowledge of historical, armament and why things developed the way they did. So I kind of had to take my normally pedantic outlook onto stuff and put it aside and go, it's not supposed to be realistic. It's supposed to look cool on a toy. It's a totally different aesthetic. No, it doesn't have to work this way. And it did take a little getting used to, because I'm so entrenched in wanting to see realistic arms and armor. And for me, like, show me a historical sword next to a fantasy sword, and I'm always going to prefer the historical sword. I just love actual designs for weapons and armor, and I find them aesthetically elegant and beautiful and that kind of thing. But again, I learned to suspend that and go, okay, that's fine, but what looks best on a 1/12 scale fantasy, knight or orc or something? It doesn't serve the aesthetic to get hung up on historical details when you're talking about what an orc scimitar looks like. It's not it's not appropriate. It doesn't apply here. So I've come to really enjoy the fantasy aesthetic on stuff. But there are times when Eric will come to me and we'll discuss weapons or what what makes sense or what doesn't make sense. And, but then there's stuff like the ogre Sir Upzak with that enormous freaking hammer, that's bigger than a dwarf, and it's like, all right, but that looks really cool, so let's just go with that.
Not sure who's going to be able to lift that, but yeah.
I love the when stuff rides the line between, like, I love the super ridiculously fantasy ones like that hammer, or like the Warcraft hammer weapons, from the video game.
Sure.
But it's like not everybody's going to get to run around with that. I like them when they're related to like key significant characters or storylines.
Yeah.
So like the more slender swords in the Templar stuff from the Necronominus wave, the new mace and the Warhammer and everything on there, like, because my brother's also a history professor, and he did SCA and all that reenactment. So he would bring me, when he was done with his like weapons catalog, I forget, it was like something museum something. It was like a little magazine of all these like weapons and gear you could get for, medieval style stuff. I would just like look at it and look at all these pages and stuff. So when I saw those, I was like, oh my gosh, that's like just like out of that magazine. And it's fun seeing, like, I like the exaggerated stuff from the earlier wave, but I like that we're now getting more of the like more kind of tuned in, more realistic looking stuff.
Like there's the small Warhammer that's coming with one or two of the Templars recently. The names escape me. There's so many of them, and I'm so involved in other stuff. I forget some of the names.
Sir Elijah.
Yeah, but it's got that's the one where it's got that kind of like beak on the back of the hammer and the four prongs on the front, where it's very closely designed on historical Warhammers, and I really like that piece, and I think it looks really good in the hands of the Templar. And again, you get that massive hammer with the head and the wings and stuff on an ogre, and that looks cool too. But I always do like to see them work.
Here's that caterpillar we were talking about.
Historical designs.
So you could see where he's got, all these sets of legs.
Nice.
And then you get to here, and then he's got like 3 torsos. And yeah, I mean, I don't think I would see the studio putting something like that out, but it's really cool.
And is that, it looks like the glow in the dark Hagnon parts on the Cheshire Cat, who of course keeps disappearing. So that's awesome. Love it.
Yeah, and then he's got his Alice over here. So yeah, some very creative stuff for sure.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That hammer you were just talking about, it, and I'll say this, my brother ruined Braveheart is my all-time favorite singular movie. And even when I saw it, I knew it wasn't like historically accurate, because it was a movie and it's Hollywood. They're always going to change stuff for the dramatic effect of the movie. Right. But when I saw that hammer, it reminded me of that scene in one of those opening battles where one of the Scotsmen's like hits one of the English knights on the like his like domed I don't remember what that kind of flat. I think one of the new Templars has a similar kind of helmet where it's more like the kind of flat top looking helmet. He gets hit on that with the hammer, and it just made this most sickening like metal thunk like into the head sound, and like it's just seared into my mind. So as soon as I saw that, like I just heard that.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Where that enormous wooden, like a log, basically the guy's carrying, and it's like that's a hammer now. It's almost a hammer from Conan the Barbarian, that massive mallet kind of thing.
No. It was a little. It was like the little single-handed. I think
okay.
they
No,
come up and
different...
it's just a quick cut during the battle, and it's just like this bonk right on the head. But like the sound effect, because it was one of the first times I think I really experienced surround sound, and it was just yeah.
Yeah, now you're gonna make me have to go back and watch Braveheart again. I don't have 3.5 hours. But yeah, the hammer I remember from Braveheart was that massive wooden thing. That at some point somebody is swinging around there because it's just,
the historians are gonna ruin that kind of stuff though, because they gotta I think they weren't supposed to have kilts back then and stuff too.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Yeah,
not at all.
And the princess, you never would have met the French princess. Like she was like a young girl in France at the time of that movie or something.
At the time he died, she was like 6 or something. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
So if you ever would like to not enjoy a historical film, we'll sit down and watch it together. And because I'll just sit there and put the heel in my hand as and it's a great film. I love it, but yeah, it hurts my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got another armor question for you. When you're so there's been discussions and we all know that the Horsemen, the studio stands by the decision for the way they sculpt and the articulation because they want to keep that visual aesthetic and everything. And I've had this thought because I've seen my brother and I've seen people do as close to modern full rearmoring up at like the SCA events where they go out and they just like hit each other with like rattan swords all day and they just lay in the field like they're dead for 3 hours until someone drags them off and they reset or whatever. The articulation thing, and I'm not trying to prove a point or prove anybody wrong or prove me right, whatever, but what's your take on some people have argued that the articulation wouldn't be there because like to do all the double-handed poses because of the armor would have been restrictive to it. What's your thoughts on that?
Almost anything you can do out of armor, you should be able to do in armor.
Okay.
If it's well designed, it's not going to restrict your movement. And again, I'm saying this from the point of view of someone who's studied this, professionally and semi-professionally. Yeah. The articulation on a well-made suit of armor is fantastic, and a lot of the time, any pose you can do out of armor, you can do in armor. Now, am I talking about like a gymnast or a contortionist? Probably not, but for a normal person or someone who actually would have been wearing the armor, mobility is absolutely key. Now, there are exceptions because not all armor was made to with that in mind. For instance, we have the one helmet in the Mythic Legions that's a jousting helm. I think it first came on an orc. It's the frog helm, they call it. It's one that comes way up in front and has this little visor on top with a really flat look. Well, like historically, that wasn't for warfare. That was specifically a jousting helmet, so it was literally a piece of sporting equipment. So when you look at jousting armor, there were even parts where, depending on the armor, they would like bolt your left arm in place, kind of across your body in this kind of position, and it was literally bolted there. Okay. And sometimes had a single plate over the top. You would never go to war in something like that. That was sporting equipment. And it was for a very specific purpose. But anything that you would wear on the battlefield would absolutely be more concerned with mobility, or you can't do your job. You can't deal with what's likely to come up, on a battlefield, as opposed to in a list in a tilt yard in a very controlled situation like a joust.
Okay. All right. Well,
Now, that being said, I don't know that most people fighting in armor would be getting down in a crouched Spider-Man type pose. So,
Right.
yeah. So,
Right.
even though they could have good articulation, I don't know that that's how you would use that. So,
yeah, but it's the kind of thing where like, no, I don't want to wind up in that pose, but if I get unhorsed or knocked on my ass or something, I'm going to need to be able to get up on my own and maneuver, if I find myself on the ground. So yeah, it's a lot more mobile than I think most people would imagine.
You don't want to end up like the little brother on Christmas Story that's all bundled up and he falls in the snow. I can't get up. Yeah.
See, that's where anything I can even remotely relate to seeing my brother, the other guys put that stuff on. I was like, all those layers, because they have like the undergarment and then the pad and then the some of them had the chainmail or the different things and they put the other pieces on, and I was just like, man, I could barely walk when I had a snowsuit on or like a sweatshirt and a coat. I just feel like I'm so restricted. So that's more on me than any of that.
A lot of the time with the modern reenactment, where you're talking about SCA or some of the Buhurt stuff or the ones where, have you seen the guys like who just like absolutely go at each other with metal weapons and just like bash the tar out of each other? I think it was called Battle of Nations, and if you look up, I think it's pronounced Buhurt, Buhurt, you'll find people. The weapons aren't sharp, but they're really hitting each other hard. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the armor they wear for that is actually much heavier gauge than historical armor would have been.
Okay.
Because again, it's sporting equipment, really, because nobody wants to kill anybody else on those reenactment battlefields. So it tends to be very heavy and very thick, where if you look at historical stuff, it tends to be a little thinner. A lot of the armor that I saw people, in the SCA with, the default is like use like a 16 gauge steel for that. Where if you looked at, go to a museum and get the specs on some of the actual armor that's up there, I'm talking like battlefield armor. And you're looking at closer to like 18 gauge, in some cases hammered out, even as thin as 20 gauge in areas. And there's a number of reasons for that. Weight, the availability of materials, but also because if I'm out here doing a reenactment thing and my stuff gets dented to crap, now I have to go spend time and money to fix it rather than being able to go to an event next weekend or keep my stuff in good repair. Where on an actual battlefield, if stuff is if that armor dents, that's preventing that from transferring that shock into you wearing the armor. Denting the armor is a good thing. You don't want it so brittle that it shatters, and that
okay.
It's kind of like putting crumple zones in a car. It's going to keep you safer inside, actually. But how that applies to mythic legions, I don't really know. But yeah, you would be able to get some pretty dynamic poses in actual armor.
Now you do have some authentic chainmail in your office, correct?
Yep.
Go ahead.
I made that years ago. I was on an army deployment and bored to tears, so I ordered 50 pounds of rings and started knitting it together and realized that was even more boring, so I stopped.
So like something like that, like authentic chainmail, how much protection is that really offering in a real life situation?
Quite a bit, because it's if you look at any reproduction chainmail or most reproduction chainmail like that we have on the wall of the studio, those are just butted rings, meaning like you have this loop of steel and the ends are just kind of crimped together where they meet, solid, where anything historical, either each individual ring would have been welded, or you take the ends of the ring, you hammer them flat, you pierce them, overlap them, and rivet each individual ring. It took freaking forever, but it was really solid. They weren't gonna break open. So it was great protection against cutting and that kind of thing. But you would always wear some kind of arming coat, some kind of padding underneath it, because of course it's not going to stop much blunt impact.
Gotcha.
So a lot of time, in movies or even people cosplaying and stuff, you'll see them wearing the chainmail directly on their head. It's like, no. You need a nice thick arming coif, some quilted cotton and stuff to put under there to keep your getting those little links mashed into your head.
Yeah, that would not be good.
Yeah.
I was in my brother's class because I went to the college he was a professor at, or is a professor at, and I took the medieval class, and there's only like 12 or 13 people in the class, but he brought in some of his armor that he had made. So he put on his chainmail, and he got me to come up to the class. He's like, "All right, take the sword and hit me." So I just whacked him across the chest with the sword. He's like, "Come on, come on, hit me. That was like a tap, we're not showing anything." So I go back to swing. He's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. He's like, "I don't want to go to the hospital."
Yeah.
not that hard.
But yeah, it was weird having my brother as my professor, but yeah, that was like one of the most fun moments I think in a class in college, was getting to strike my brother with a sword in class on purpose.
Cool. I think honestly, there's actually right now, like back when I was doing the armor professionally, this is pre-internet days, it was a while back, and this didn't exist so much, but now especially there is so much real important historical work being done by the guys who are recreating arms and armor to close historical specifications and testing it out, and going over like period fencing manuals and hey, how were these actually being used? What did this actually do? And there's really significant and legitimate historical work being done by the guys who are reenacting and making their own armor and stuff today. Not everybody, of course, but a lot of it's really good.
So how much of that are you guys doing as you're putting out new pieces, new armor pieces, new weapon pieces? How much research is being done to try to get some historically accurate type stuff?
I know Eric has reference for that kind of stuff, and he has a pretty good handle on what's historical and what's not. But again, it's all got to go through the filter of what looks cool on a Mythic Legions toy.
Right.
And that's ultimately the arbiter of whether a thing gets, designed a certain way or not. Does it look cool? Because, of course, historically we didn't have flaming swords, but Arathir's sword is freaking cool. So
yeah,
that's what we're going with. It's a fantasy line. So being able to create those designs, informed by historical sources, but the rule of cool is always going to be most important.
Rule of cool. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
You guys have been doing a lot more soft goods recently on your figures. As a painter, how do you focus on, where and what kind of paints you're going to use that's going to add to that soft good look rather than take away from it? Obviously, it leaves you like, we're looking at like the Sir Enoch that they just did, the new Templar.
Right.
And I mean, he's almost head to toe soft goods.
Yep.
So how do you still make your mark on that figure when you're painting it, to make sure that you're adding to that overall look?
Some of that comes with just the composition, and some of it comes, there's a little before and after with the soft goods. A lot of the time, we'll print up because the prototypes we use are 3D printed. So if we know something's going to have a lot of soft goods, we'll make sure we print up a prototype right away, get that sent out, for soft goods, so that the soft good prototype is in hand either while we're painting it or comes in right after. And often we'll go back and adjust our colors to match the specific hue of a piece of soft good, so that it's not like, oh, this is a really ivory white on this surcoat, but I use this kind of cool, almost bluish white on the painted parts. It's like, nope, it's got to match. Ideally, the soft goods come back before the painting. But not always. A lot of time, we'll do stuff and it's like, all right, we got the 90% solution. This is as far as we can go with it until we get those soft goods back to match up with.
Gotcha.
Interesting.
What, and I know we're hour and a half in, so I know we've got some customizers watching and that will probably be tuning in. What kind of painting tips can you offer for anybody that's working on these that you think would be beneficial?
Most of the tips that I find are useful for folks, because most people who are doing customization, you already have the brushes you like, you already have a set of paints you like. There's a ton of acrylic paints out there that all work well. And I mean, in the studio, we use some Citadel paints and some Vallejo paints, but also your 80-cent jar of craft paint from Michael's works just as well. So don't get too wrapped around the axle about your materials. I think what's going to make the difference for a lot of people is composition. That's where I find if people have a weak point, that's usually it. So I think my strongest recommendation: get a color wheel. You can get them on Amazon or wherever else. They're usually no more than like $10-12. You can go to an art supply store, whatever, and take a look at that color wheel and let that help you make your color decisions. Because even if your application is a little shaky, or maybe your straight lines aren't quite as straight as you like them, if you've chosen the right color, that's going to kind of make up for a host of other tiny errors anyway, and your eye is really going to respond to a good color palette that works on a figure. The technique will come with practice. You'll get better at those straight lines, or putting it on a wash or a dry brush or whatever. But the area, and I find this with miniature painting as well, the area that people usually see the most improvement from is the composition. Make sure you know how to put a color palette together that works.
Gotcha. What about paint matching? I know you guys, like you said, you guys keep certain recipes like for all the different golds and things like that. But like, let's say that you got some soft goods and let's say with that Templar, I think I just had it up. Hold on one second. I will share my screen. So like on this, like you get the soft goods and you're trying to match the shield to the soft goods. Any tips for color matching for folks that when they're trying to do it?
I'm going to go back to the color wheel again and take a look at it. And this, I think you need some practice also to kind of train your eye. But when you're looking at that and you're like, all right, I have a white and it's not matching it, you're going to have to learn to say, okay, if I put some blue into this white, this is what's going to happen. If I put some green into it or some yellow into it, how is it going to change the tone of that? So when you learn to look at those colors, you go, okay, I can identify this as a warm color or that as a cool color, and understand what that means. And it's not that esoteric. It's not that really in the weeds. But if you don't pick up like one good source on color theory, it's hard to explain without a visual reference in front of me. But yeah, there you go. Color wheel is your friend. I know a lot of people kind of tend to shy away from it because it almost feels too, I don't know, academic or too technical, but it's pretty straightforward, and you're training your eye to look at something and go, okay, oh, I know what I need to put into that white to make it match, or I know what I need to put into this brown. It needs a little more red in there to warm it up, or maybe a little more green to cool it off, or what have you, and that'll match what's there. So in the studio, I think most of us are so practiced on that it's just kind of intuitive at this point. It's kind of like trying to teach somebody to drive. Oh yeah, I do it all the time, but I can't tell you how to do it. It just becomes second nature. So with color matching, it's that I think most of us there just rely on the number of hours we have in, or I got to match that. I can start with something close and add this and that and the other thing, and I find that I'll get a 90% match in 5 minutes, but it'll take me another half hour to get that last 10%, that fine tuning.
Right. Yeah, I know, like for me, and I'm sure there's a lot of customizers like myself, and even you said you really didn't have any art background as far as education. I've never done anything with color theory, so I've never learned any of that. So it was really a struggle, especially like Caucasian flesh tones. When you're looking at it, and maybe you need to add some blue, and adding blue to a flesh tone just like it doesn't sit well with your brain, because you're like, why would I put blue in a flesh tone? I don't want, but that's what you need to make the color right, like to make that little adjustment, or some green or whatever it is. So, sometimes you have to add a color that your brain's like telling you that doesn't make sense, but it does. So, good advice on the color wheel. Any other tips for that, especially like skin tones?
Yeah, you know what? It's hard to say, and without a specific question. I mean, again, that color wheel is gonna answer a lot of questions, but experimenting as well. Like I said, it might be counterintuitive to add the blue to that flesh, but find out what happens when you do. See what that does. But also, there are currently so many acrylic paints available with so many game lines and model lines and stuff out there, that a lot of the time you don't really have to mix. Oh, hey, I'm looking for this skin tone. I'll just go to my Vallejo paints alone, and I've got like 8 different light skin tones and maybe 6 different dark skin tones, ready right out of a bottle.
That's really nice when you find one that's like either perfect or almost perfect. Like, I know that like the deluxe Gladiator came out, and the skin tone was like way different from any of the other figures that had been out there. And Steven, who's in the chat now, went to the store, and he forgot to bring like the figure with him, or like anything with him to color match it. And so he just grabbed a bottle of Citadel, I think it was like the Tau Light Ochre, and brought it home, and it's like perfect, like right out of the bottle. And you don't get that. That's super rare. But yeah, if you can find, a paint that's either spot on or close to spot on, that's the first step, is just try to get it as close as you can, and then make the little adjustments, I guess.
Yeah. So. Yeah, absolutely. There's some questions in chat. Yes, I've done LARPing and SCA both, and other reenactment for different periods and stuff, and it's all a ton of fun. But yes, I've run around the woods whacking people with foam swords, and pretending to be an orc or dwarf or goblin or stuff. Yeah. And but by the way, I don't think he would mind me saying Diego in the studio is still very into LARP. I think he goes to a game about every month, so we talk about that quite a bit. So much fun,
Here's JG says, any examples of a specific figure that have taken a drastic change in terms of color combo? So.
Yes, and I'm trying to think of them now. There were some skin tones that needed some real reworking. I want to say the Legion Builder Gladiator, the one with the one armored arm.
Yeah.
We had to mess around with the skin tones and stuff on that for a while, and then there were a couple of different iterations, but for the most part, like, and when I was doing that set, I did the that Legion Builder Goblin as well. It comes with like the kind of metallic green turtle shield and stuff, and I know that's at least the second color we used on that. I can't remember what the first one was, but it was completely different. It might have been like a charcoal color or almost a flat black or something, and we looked at it and we're like, nah, that's all wrong, so we did have to change it. It does happen, not as frequently as you might think, but frequently enough to continually be inconvenient.
What about characters that you've had to use colors that maybe weren't complementary, that were just kind of like normally colors that you wouldn't put together, but you threw together on there and it worked?
I'm trying to think what, because again, so much stuff comes across the desk, and so much stuff that even if it doesn't end up on my desk, we all wind up looking at each other's stuff, and I can't think of anything that had to be adjusted like that. What comes to mind though is when we were doing the Poxus stuff. There's this kind of rot effect on the Poxus. It's the Poxus himself and on his horse and a couple of other figures where it's this kind of bright green and yellow where you look at it and you go, oh, that's rot, that's nasty. And that's
yeah.
There were a couple of iterations of that because there were some test pieces I did for Eric on how do you want to do this, because like, okay, we've got this pustule and it's got this bright green with a yellow dome on it, and it looks nasty. But like the first test I did was like really realistic looking, like medical,
yeah,
nasty
gross
stuff that looked like, you're in a surgical theater, and it's like, no, that's too visceral. That's not the Mythic Legion's aesthetic at all. We need to make it look like, yes, it's Poxus, but it's magical Mythic Legion's rot, not like actual gangrene or something so unpleasant like that, because that just didn't work for the line.
Cool gross, not gross.
Right.
Steven here is asking, how much do you rely on an airbrush?
Very little. Usually when we're airbrushing something, you'll find it if you take a portrait like a head, especially the like a human head, there's usually airbrushing on it from the bottom. So we'll take that, tilt the head back, and airbrush it from this angle, just to get some gentle shadows under the cheekbones, under the chin, under the brow ridge, that kind of thing. So we'll use airbrushing for that, and also to pull out like the definition of muscles on like a gladiator figure or a barbarian or something. And then some of the color shift stuff we've been using, like on a Rakagor, when you see him, some of that like glistening effect is airbrush, but most of the color applications are traditional bristle brush. The airbrush is really only for occasional special effects and shading.
Cool.
Very cool.
We do have Nate Barch jumped in to say hi.
Hi, Nate.
What's up, Nate?
Jesse.
Yes.
I know something that you're very into, that Cameron is as well, and that is Critical Role. So yes. I don't know if you have any questions or things that you'd like to run by him, but this would be a good time, I think.
Well, I know since you didn't watch it, I try not to go too heavy into the things that are not able for you to participate in the conversation. But
have at it, man.
Yeah, I've only been playing D&D for about 8 years with mostly the same group of people. That's whose house I'm in right now, is my DM's house, and I don't know when I became aware of it. So we started playing, so like I said, 8 years ago. What is that? 2015, 2014. And
was that really 8 years ago?
Yeah,
I guess it was.
Yeah, that's weird to think of it, like, yeah. But I got into Critical Role. They talked about it forever, but I'm like, man, I can't sit and watch 4.5 hour YouTube shows like of people having fun and I can't get involved. And then earlier this
Yeah, I've
year,
seen some episodes of Critical Role, but and as much as I appreciate it, it's hard for me to watch live play podcasts.
yeah, so I was listening to audiobooks. I got into audiobooks last year finally because I like reading, but I'm like, I don't have enough time with the customizing and all the other things I want to do. I'm like, I don't have time to sit and read. So I started listening to audiobooks because I can do it at work. So I started I saw the animated show last year, the season 1, loved it.
The Vox
And then,
Machina,
yeah.
that one, yeah.
And then when season 2 came out this year, I'm like, wait, surely they have like an audio version of the show, like the gameplay. So I found that. So I've been burning through that, listening to it, 6, 7, 8 hours a day at work while I'm working, and I'm not even halfway through the second campaign, but I fell in love with the characters, especially the first campaign characters. And it's just fun listening to the audio version and then rewatching season 1 and 2, seeing all the little elements that you're thinking, okay, there's just like a boar head on this one guy's shop wall, but like that's a moment in the game. Like it's part of the story. So it's just the little nods that just show up, even if it's a slightly different take on it. So you said do you watch the animated show? Is that
I've watched season 1 of Vox Machina, and I just started season 2. And I've watched some episodes of Critical Role. I like to pick up, because obviously they're all voice actors. I like to pick up some of their techniques for my own game at my own table and see how they're doing things and see how people react. But again, for some reason, the live play podcasts, I lose focus.
Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't watch, like I've watched a couple episodes where I've listened to it and I'm like, man, I want to watch their emotional, like in person, because it's so much improv. It's not scripted, so like they don't know how their dice are going to roll, going into it. So it's just really fun to see, like, when I heard it, I'm like, oh man, this is like, I'll admit, I full on openly weep sometimes while I'm listening to this show, just when they get to the deep emotional parts. Other times I'm laughing and my coworkers like look around at me like, what is this guy on today? And but yeah, it's just it's a lot of fun. And I don't know if there's not a question in there.
All right.
Sorry.
So like Cameron, speaking of that, like when you're DMing a campaign, would you say that it's typically like more serious? Are you guys laughing and having a good time? Is it a mixture of emotions?
Both. It depends on the game. Like, if I'm playing a serious game and people are there to really get into the characters and tell a collaborative story, it can get very intense. On the other hand, if you want to play a game or just a session of a game that's much more lighthearted and goofy, people need that kind of release. That works too. A lot of it is, reading the room and getting that collaborative storytelling going. If I can kind of bring that back to toys for a second. A lot of the time when we go to toy shows, people will come up and say, hey, this is cool. I'm buying this because it looks like my D&D character, or I want to build this and that. Or people come up with customs going, yeah, you made this, but here's my D&D, this is my Goblin Alchemist, that's my character. And I love that kind of stuff because having started as a miniature painter, the collaborative storytelling element that you get verbally around the table is also a visual language, and that's something that I try to bring to the toys is what's going to help determine the paint, the colors I use on the toys. Well, what are we trying to communicate? What's the story? Because if we take the same figure, right? Let's take that Templar figure you had a minute ago. He's in this bright ivory white, clean surcoat, and that has a really strong dramatic element to it. Now, if we took that same exact thing, and that surcoat now has different colors on it, it's weathered, it has mud spattered on the edges of it, and there's some rust in the joints of the armor. Now, just by changing the visual element, the story changes. You know, just by looking at that figure, oh, this is a different situation. You know, this is a different character with a different story and a different narrative. So I think the visual language works hand in hand with the more verbal to tell a story, and I really try to bring that to you know my paint schemes on the toys.
So that's a couple times now that you've mentioned, you know, how important the story aspect is for you, not only with your painting, but also with when you're DMing, that the story is really important. How much are you involved with the actual bios for these characters in either creating them or at least understanding them as you're going into the paint job so that you can bring those details to life in the figure?
I'm not particularly involved in the bios, but when we get new figures, you know, especially if it's a new design or it's something like how many specs are out now for Cosmic?
Yeah,
There's
there's the Black Commander, the other one, and then the Miner.
Right. Okay, the Miner. That's the one I was thinking of. That one, for instance, I didn't like. I know Jeremy wrote that story about the Specs Miner that he put up, I think, on the Cosmic Cabal or something. That's really cool. But I didn't have that yet. I would talk to Eric about, well, what is this guy and what's his job? What does he do? And that's why, like, you know, that drill he has, you know, dust and dirt on it, and his suit is almost all black, so it looks very utilitarian. So even though I don't have a specific bio, I'll know, oh, this is what, you know, we want to get across with this. Like, you know, I painted the new the Gideon's Heavens brand, for instance, and like I can't tell you what his middle name is or, you know, what his favorite food is, although it's probably tacos. You know, but I have a good idea. Oh, he's the head of this faction, the Order of Aetheron. How do we, you know, what do we want to bring across with this? So if you look at like the gold that we used on Magnus, you know, that's a very martial looking character. Well, then look at the gold we used on Gideon Heavens brand, and if you look in that big pauldron with like the bird head and stuff in there, there's a wash on that gold that's like kind of I think it was like a turquoise or maybe purple color or something, because, you know, hey, it's got to look kind of, you know, magical or mystical or something, because he's not just a foot slogging fighter. There's something special about this guy. So, you know, we discussed that and how to bring that across. You know, how do we make him look, you know, regal and a little magical and that kind of stuff.
So what does that look like, that conversation between you and Eric? Is it just something where he, you know, pops into your room while you're kind of working on it? Or do you guys have like a meeting to talk about the wave as a whole and the different characters that you're doing? Or how does that conversation come about?
A little of both. Usually when we have like a new wave coming in, I'll get a chance to sit down with them for maybe a half hour, and we'll discuss these are the toys in this wave. And this is the feel of this wave, right? Like the Necronominous wave, we talked about, you know, okay, the Order of Aetheron half, you know, this is the look we're going for. And that's going to be really contrasted against this more gritty, dark, weathered, undead look for, you know, the Necronominous faction. And we'll sit down and we'll talk about that. And in fact, we had a long conversation about standardizing bone color for the skeletons. You know, so to make sure, oh, geez, we're putting out skeleton hand packs and people are going to swap these parts. They have to be swappable, right? Like orc flesh green has to mostly match other orc flesh green in the line. So we'll discuss that. But then when it comes to, you know, an individual character within that line, he'll often actually pop in the studio and say, hey, what are you working on? Let's see what's going on. And we'll discuss for a few minutes, you know, what story we want to tell with that figure, and how, you know, the color choices can support that. And a lot of that's Eric telling me, well, this character is going to be like this, or this is how, these are his characteristics, these are his properties. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this color to bring that out, or I'm going to, try, making these bones really, bloody or muddy looking, or something to bring out that aspect. What's the name of the black armored ogre figure that
Paradox.
got announced? Yeah, again, I'm bad with the names, but like we discussed that, and he was like, "Oh, this is Necronominus's child." So I was like, "Oh, if that's Necronominus's child, let's use the same bone tone we used on that wave, and I'll put those the tusks and stuff in that same bone color." And then he was like, "Well, I want that armor to look like it's like, yeah, that's the why." He's like, "I want it to look like it's like a witch's cauldron, like that heavy cast iron type." And I was like, "Oh, okay, if that's what you want, then let me try, this kind of dry brush or that kind of color." And then with the, the sword, I'm like, yeah, it's not just a regular sword. There's something going on. So we've established that a lot of the magic that you'll see in the Poxus wave, the Necronominus, is like in the cooler, green, blue, purple. So if you look in the channels of that sword, that's up by the hilt. You can see it's kind of this turquoise color in those channels, and then down by the point of the sword, it's a purple, and that blends through there because I wanted that kind of magical, look. That sword is something special. It's not just a big hunk of metal. So he'll say, "Yeah, we want to make the sword a little magical," and I'll say, "Okay, I'll try this or that." And there's even though the sword looks silver, there's purples and greens and blues in there to kind of punch up that magic aspect of it.
I'll be honest, I didn't even notice that. As I've looked at this picture a bunch of different times and didn't notice it. And now that you mentioned it, that's all I see. So that's some great insight on there. I mean, and that's part of the, kind of what we talked with the Monkey King earlier, that like you see these pictures, but then you get it in hand, and like, I noticed like the detail on the back of the belt on the Monkey King and stuff. There's certain things that you just can't pick up in a photograph. And yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, like, again, the photographs we get that Trevor sends are just phenomenal, and it makes our stuff look good. But there's always something about having the toys in hand, because they are designed with such a tactile element in mind, that being able to turn it over in your hand and stuff makes a difference in the way it's perceived. And it's always going to be a little different, having something in hand as opposed to, seeing a photo of it.
So as far as like the division of labor, like I'm guessing that Eric, I mean, I know there's certain ones that he's talked about where he's like, "Oh man, I've, kind of had this idea in my head for years," or I've, the sculpt on this took a long time. So are you, like, when you get the things for a wave that you have to paint, is the whole wave coming at once, or are you getting these things sporadically? And how do they decide who's going to paint what? Do you guys have any kind of like, do you have a point where you can raise your hand and go, "Hey, I really would like to work on that one"? Or is it just kind of like, "Hey, you're going to do this, this, and this, and Sherry's going to do that, and Joe's going to do these things"? And
no, we normally we'll get a wave kind of at once or in a short order. And before we get to paint, they have to be not only printed, but cleaned and prepped. I actually do a lot of that clean and prep myself. I spend a lot of time, cleaning up the 3D prints and, sanding them and fitting them and making sure they're good to go, and then laying them out in the trays. But occasionally there'll be something that comes by, where Eric's like, "Oh man, I really want you to work on this," or "I really want Sherry to work on this," because he has a pretty solid idea of, what everybody brings to the table. But a lot of the time, it's up to us how we want to divide it. And I generally, because I'm doing a lot of the cleaning stuff, I generally kind of parse out the work as I can, but I try to be really cognizant of what people want. And I will usually, ask Sherry or Joe or whoever, hey, is there something you really want to paint? Or sometimes I'll know that like, oh, this is right up Sherry's alley. She's really good at doing this, or she really enjoys doing this kind of figure. So like Sherry does most of the female figures because she likes them. She relates to them. Hey, cool. You want to do that? Here you go. So it's pretty open and cooperative as far as, who gets what work. There's very little of, no, you have to do this and you have to do that. We have a lot of autonomy in saying, oh, there's some of the stuff like, I don't care. I want to paint it. Sure, I'll paint it. And some of the stuff is like, oh man, I really want to do this figure. Is it okay if I do it? And the answer is always yes. So
that's cool. Yeah, it feels like a very collaborative workspace. And it's something that we've mentioned a few times between me and Jesse, just encouraging people to put in for intern for a day, because I thought that you walk in and you see all this stuff and you see the 2-ups and the place is amazing in and of itself. And then the way that you guys break it down and take it, through the individual sessions is cool. But I think the biggest thing that I was impressed with is just how awesome everybody is. Like there's nobody in there that's just like a jerk or full of themselves or looking down on anybody. Everybody is like super nice and working together. And it just feels like you guys are all like a well-oiled machine, just kind of, taking one note from another and working in unison.
Yeah, it's collaborative, it's cooperative, it's friendly, and it's pretty relaxed, and that works. That's I've been in situations where even creative, situations where it's like, no, you have to do this, you have to do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. But there's really none of that. In the studio now, it's very much, if someone feels strongly, oh man, I really want to paint this, again, the answer is always yes.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Did want to pull up this comment from Joe. He says, props to the factory workers being able to mimic such amazing paint work. I definitely gotta agree with that. Yep. One thing I will say with that, though, I know that there's some times where something comes back and it's not exactly right, and there's some quality control issues, and you guys have to look at some stuff. Like I think when we were there for intern, there was a problem with the Sphexian wings, the way that they were looking. So what is like after you guys have done the paint samples, you sent the stuff off, and you start getting these things from the factory, and maybe there's just something that's just not right. What is your role in that to try to help them get it to where it needs to be?
That pretty much is Chris Gorich's specialty. So he's the guy who interfaces with the factories for us, and yeah, absolutely, the painters there almost always just do a magnificent job of matching what we give them in terms of color and quality and everything. But when there are issues, and of course they turn up, it's Chris who communicates with the factory and gets things squared away and back on track. And like occasionally there'll be occasionally it'll be really smooth. They send something back the first time and it's like, wow, they absolutely got it, and we're good to go. And other times like obviously we've been waiting a while for the Poxis wave. I guess there's been more, back and forth. And of course, every time something has to be changed, it's more time. We got to communicate the issue back to them. They got to make the change, get a sample back to us. I'm not really involved in that process. If you've been there physically, it's kind of a small space. So, I'm aware of it, but it's not my thing. But, as
they don't ever come to you and say, hey, how did you get this particular color, because we can't get it.
No, they never have. And I figured that was going to be an issue with some of the color shift stuff, like on the Monkey King's Phoenix feathers and on some other things that we've seen with that iridescent look. But they've done a great job. I was like, hey, if you need me to send a set of the iridescent paints I'm using to the factory, we can do that. Needed it, and like I said, occasionally stuff gets delayed, but as Chris and I have discussed, it's like if if it gets delayed and it's late, it's only late until it comes out. If it's wrong forever.
Yeah.
So, if it takes a little extra time to get it just right, you get it just right.
And that's a good point, because I mean, folks in chat and me and Jesse, like, we've been doing, collecting toys for a while, not just for Horsemen Studios. And there's a lot of times where what you see, what's pre-ordered, what you see as a prototype is not what you get when you get it in hand. But that's never the case with Mythic Legions. Like, it's always as good as the prototype, if not in many cases better, to where, you hear people say, man, this was a sleeper, or I wasn't expecting to like this one as near as much as I did. So, which is really, kudos to, Chris and that team, and just making sure that quality is on point, because I never hear the same things that I hear from, I'm not going to name companies, but you know what I'm saying? These other ones where it's like, hey, you showed me this thing, I pre-ordered it, then it comes and it looks completely different. Like, that's never the case with you guys.
Right. Well, I'm happy to hear that. I know it's not something that I'm involved in that process, but I'm aware of that process. And again, because it's such a physically small space, we're pretty aware of what goes on. And yeah, Chris does, a really good job of taking care of that stuff and making sure that, it's done right.
So he's not just a goofy guy, like, he actually does work.
Yeah, but two things can be true at the same time. So.
Okay. I don't know if this is the case, but I'll pull this up. Nate's asking if there's ever a time where you guys, several of you, paint the same figure and see who has the best outcome.
No, that's never happened. I think it's no, I don't know why it would, but also there's no time for that.
Gotcha.
Everything is always a time crunch. It may be fun to do that at some point. I don't know. I mean, I guess if we had the luxury of the time, to do that and say, hey, we're going to do a thing where, I'll paint one and Sherry will paint one and Joe will paint one, and, we'll all put one together and maybe people can vote on it or something, that would be fun. But no, we've never done anything like that in the studio.
Gotcha. And then I've got one more question. I'll see what Jesse's got. But what about, like, the figure obscura repaints? Are you guys involved with what looks you may come? Because I know I saw Eric on I believe he was on with Jeremy and did an interview, and he mentioned that when you're doing these repaints for the retailer versions, he's still trying to stay true to the lore of that character.
Right.
But offer something new for folks, to get it with a little bit different look. Are you guys involved in what kind of colors may go on those to change it up?
To an extent, yeah. Like for instance, I painted both versions of the Headless Horseman.
Okay.
So the first version, Eric and I sat down and we talked about it. We went over a whole bunch of different color possibilities. But what we ended up with was we wanted something for the first iteration that was really true to the very traditional look of that Headless Horseman character. The pumpkin is pumpkin colored, the fire is fire colored, the leather is black and brown, that kind of thing, where with repaints and stuff, it's like, oh, we can do different stuff here. What story do we want to tell? What do we want to bring to this? And there's other stuff we're like, well, let's play with this and that. And we, again, have that conversation collaborating on, well, what's the color scheme going to be? And working on that together, finding what we can change and what we can't. And usually if we have the discussion, bang, I'll put something out and it's 90% there because we've already discussed it. We're on the same sheet of music, a little tweaking and it's good to go. But yeah, he's very aware with the figure obscura that there are different interpretations of a lot of these characters. And what do we want to bring to it with each iteration of paint. And also something like if we've put out like that Headless Horseman, you could easily look at it and say, okay, that's the definitive Headless Horseman. He's done. but if there's going to be, another edition of it, or a retailer edition or something later on, how do we make that equally appealing and cool so that people will want it, or want a second one, or a different version of it or something. Stay true to the character, but bring something new to it. There he is. Yep.
Yeah,
So,
I absolutely love this version. I mean, I love the first version, but when this came out, I'm like, this is my Headless Horseman. So now
I kind of feel the same way. I really love the first one, and the fact that I was able to do something so traditional with it, but this one, being able to play with that green flame and the purple tint in the leather and stuff, and make those work together was a lot of fun. Do something a little more wild with it.
Now the hooves here, is that like a glow in the dark paint, or is it just kind of looks like it might be, but I didn't know if it is or not.
Well, this isn't like the prototype doesn't glow in the dark, but I think the hooves and eyes glow on this, or will glow in the dark.
Okay.
I believe they said that the green elements were all meant, so some of the mane and the tail and the eyes, the hooves, and the pumpkin.
Yeah, the eyes and hooves, and I think the flame. Yeah, they should
have a glow effect to them.
Yeah, I think I'm going to use the cape from the original Headless Horseman, but everything else from the retailer. And that's mostly because I want to take this cape on this retailer one and put it on the Oleg Thygar from Cosmic, because I saw Joe do that on one of their pop and swaps, and it looked awesome.
I can see that kind of burnt orange color looking good against that Thygar's turquoise too. That's a nice compliment.
Yeah. But this is just a good example of what you're talking about. Like the first Headless Horseman, I saw many people talking about that as figure of the year. And so then to come out with another one, a different version that's painted up differently, and have people go, oh, I need that too. That's pretty cool. So
like the first one, with the, like you were saying, the more traditional, more realistic colors, like that could easily be Brahm in disguise, when he's, from the story where he's pretending to be the Headless Horseman. And then you get this one, like this is the real deal. This is the spectral supernatural one with the,
That's cool. See, now you've got me thinking about, like, wow, what if we did a spectral one on, like, I don't know, like ethereal blues and purples and stuff. And I'm just doodling, like, but that, again, you look at something like this, and just by changing the colors on the existing sculpt, tell a different story. You bring something different to it.
Yeah. I think the other thing that I've really liked about the Figure Obscura, and I've mentioned this to Jeremy too, is that I've learned something. Like it's been a learning experience for me, because none of these characters did I know really much about. Like I didn't, even the Father Christmas, like I know of Santa, but I didn't know the history of Father Christmas. Headless Horseman, I knew zero of them. I'd never even heard of the Monkey King. So for me, it's not only are you getting these great figures with new tooling and new parts, and they just painted beautifully, but then you're also learning about these other cultures and about this, kind of the lore that goes behind these characters. So it's been a really fun line to follow for sure.
I love working on it. I love, seeing what Eric comes up with next. And there's no way to predict, like, oh, what's he going to do next? Because, like, I know with, when our first two were Krampus, and then the Headless Horseman, and then the Father Christmas, people are like, oh, it's a holiday line. We're like,
not really,
kind of, but not really. So then when like Monkey King came out, we're like, all right, we're gonna throw people for a loop, and it's but it's tied to either real world cultures or literature or something existing in a way that Mythic Legions and Cosmic Legions aren't necessarily. So it's definitely its own feel or series of different feels to it. So I really like seeing when that stuff comes out. And those of us in the studio are just as surprised as you are, when Eric comes up with the next figure obscura design.
Yeah, I think everybody just wants to know, when do we get the Jersey Devil? So that is like, it's got to happen, right? I mean,
I would think so. Even without the figure obscura, that's something that has been discussed from time to time in the studio. It's our local thing. It's something that I've been aware of since I was a little kid. And Weird New Jersey magazine. It's been published for I think over 20 years now. They had a weird US TV show that was on like the Travel Channel or something like that. And it's these guys, Mark Moran and Mark Skirman, and they collect. They're here in New Jersey, and they collect like local legends and lore and everything from like ghost stories to abandoned buildings that have like urban legends about them and that kind of thing. And their mascot is the Jersey Devil. So, we see that around a lot. It's a cool character.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different interpretations of it, over time. And again, if you look at the story behind it, it's bizarre. Like there was one of the earliest Jersey Devil sightings was actually Napoleon III, who was hunting in Western New Jersey and said he was accosted by this, creature. It's like, really? Yeah, it's the stories are out there.
That's another character that I really know nothing about. I've heard of the Jersey Devil. I've heard of, everybody really asking for the Jersey Devil. I have no idea what one is supposed to look like. I have no idea what the lore is behind it, but I just can't wait to get one in hand and then see the bio and see the blog thing that Jeremy does. And it's just going to be another one of those that I know I'm going to learn something about.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I see in the comments, Dave is on it. Yeah. The 13th child from the Leeds family. Yeah. It was Mother Leeds, who was supposed to have cursed her 13th child, and it was born a devil. But when you go deep into it, there's stories about the Jersey Devil coming out of like this weird like political mudslinging contest in the press in, I think it was the 1700s, and this figure who may have been created to discredit this one person. It goes really deep, and there's all different levels to it. But yeah, if you look at just the folklore thing, yeah, it was known as the Leeds Devil, and there's a Leeds Point in New Jersey, and people have tried to figure out exactly what area, like what house or what development that this may have come from and stuff. So long history of sightings of this semi mystical cryptid thingy.
Is it like the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot, where people actually come to Jersey trying to look for this thing? Like, do you get any tourists like going on tours trying to find this thing?
Absolutely. But,
really?
But it's the area it's from. It used to be called the Pine Barrens, and now I like to call it the Pine Lands and stuff. It's this massive area in central Jersey of wilderness, more than you would expect to find in a state of this size, where it's all like just miles and miles and miles of scrub pine and sandy soil and waterways that, because the soil is so soft, keep changing their courses, so it's really difficult to navigate. There's so much to that particular legend. I think it'd be fun. But no plans that I'm aware of right now. But yeah, that would be a cool thing to do.
Cool.
Well, I mean, that sounds like a perfect figure with the political tie-in, if that's part of it, to put out next year during election season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that happens next year, you guys got a couple anniversaries coming up. You guys got the anniversary of Four Horsemen Studios, anniversary of the Mythic Legion line. It's also the Year of the Dragon next year. as we just study your face.
Yeah. Well, again, that kind of stuff is I don't know what's coming, and it's above my pay grade. But for sure, I mean, there's been so much talk around the community and in the studio about a dragon that we like to just among ourselves imagine. Well, what's it going to be? What are we going to do? We have to do some kind of dragon, right? And no, there's no official. There's no official plan that I am aware of. This is not saying it's happening, but those of us in the studio, of course, we want to see a dragon. That would be cool as hell. Everybody wants to see a dragon. How it's going to be approached, I don't know. I assume we'll. Oh, hey, Cookie. I assume we'll see some kind of dragon. It's the kind of thing that has been discussed at Legion's Con and among us in the studio and everything. But I'm not aware of.
Have you bounced it around in your head at all about if you were to paint a dragon, what you would do? Like, you don't have to tell us what colors or what, but I mean, have you thought of, I would approach it this way kind of thing?
Absolutely. Yeah. And we've discussed it some too. Like, the closest we've come so far is when Arakagor was done, the big blue dragon dude from the Poxus wave.
Yep.
And Eric and I discussed for a while, well, what do we want this dragon to be? There's so many possibilities. And what he wanted something that fit in with that wave and that definitely looked magical, sorcerous. So it got that blue, the aquamarine, the turquoise, the purple, some greens, and that shimmering effect on him to definitely make it like, as soon as you look at him, that's magical. That's a sorcerous dragon. But we discussed doing him in white, doing him in black, red, green, just earthy browns, all these possibilities, and what's going to come out of it, I honestly don't know. But yeah, we for sure talked about how we would approach a dragon, or how we would like to approach a dragon. It's come up in conversation. Again, to the best of my knowledge, there's nothing official. There's nothing set in stone. But of course, it's a conversation we've had around the office because it's fun to talk about.
Yeah. Well, and then you guys just did the Scourge figure for the newest Cosmic Wave that is, kind of that same Arakagor body, but now in a green.
Yep. Sherry painted the Scourge one.
Nice.
Yep.
You did the Arakagor and she did the Scourge?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
And some of this stuff, like, because again, there's so many things. Some of them I don't remember. It's like I look at it, it's like, did I paint this? I don't remember. But I remember doing Arakagor took quite a while.
Yeah.
And yeah, that wave I think is there he is, the Scourge. That looks really cool.
Yeah. So that's what a green dragon looks like. We know blue and green. So I just, the amount of detail, we kind of talked about this with the Monkey King earlier, like on the back of this figure, like it's not even, the front that you're going to see most often, but the amount of detail in the back is crazy. So, and then this one's got the alternate head as well.
Yeah. The kind of Kragnar head on it too. Yeah. And this one I think is a tribute figure, but I'm just too old to have really been into like Masters of the Universe stuff when it first hit.
Yeah.
So I'm aware of it. But it didn't really,
nostalgia there for you.
No, it didn't inform my childhood toy buying. I had a couple of them. Like I picked up a Stinkor back in the day just because like 14-year-old me was like, wow, this action figure special feature is that it literally smells bad. Like that was just so absurd. I was like, all right.
There's a part of me, just because I want to be petty for all the people that want a massive dragon. I want it to be like a dragonling, where the Mythic Legion's Mythos dragon is just like Lockheed from X-Men.
Like Lockheed,
sure.
I just tell people when they're wanting a 4 Horseman dragon, I just tell them to go get the Granomir from the Motu line, because that's a Mythic Legion dragon. So I love that Granomir sculpt. That is awesome. Oh, so good.
Yeah, I'm like everybody else. I'm really hoping we do a Mythic Legions Dragon, and I think that would be a ton of fun to work on. And I think probably something like that would be large enough that a lot of us could work on it. So that would be cool.
Nice.
Well, here's a question tying into dragons, and since Joe Gonzalez thrown out the chromatic versus metallic dragons question going to D&D lore, we don't have to get super deep into it. Have you seen the D&D movie that just came out?
I have seen the D&D movie that just came out.
What did you think of what do they call it? Emberchawd,
Timbershode,
fat dragon.
Apparently, I had to look it up after the film. Apparently, that's like it's established in D&D lore, as canon. That is a specific character, but I wasn't aware of him.
Okay.
Before that, most of my literal D&D gaming was back in AD&D, first edition stuff, and a lot of the role playing I do now is other systems or games. So
Gotcha.
I'm not aware of some of the more recent lore, but yeah, that was a little lost on me.
I just loved that he I'm not as versed in all the different lore, but I just loved that he was just such a big lethargic fat dragon that's literally just sliding on his belly down the gold and everything.
Yeah, I like that it even not knowing the specific character, it kind of went against expectations, and brought something a little more unexpected to the film. So it was cool.
Yeah, I think my favorite thing about it is that myself as somebody that has never played D&D a day in my life, I watched that movie and I feel like I don't feel lost. There's nothing about that movie that doesn't make sense to me. It just feels like they made it for non-D&D fans. And then somebody like yourself or Jesse watches it with a D&D background, and you pick up on some things that maybe I didn't pick up on, and it feels like it was made for you. So the fact that they were able to play to both audience types, the people that did know D&D and the people that didn't, I think they just did a really good job of making that, a film that was worth watching for everybody. So.
Yeah. I had to look up some of the Easter eggs because again, I'm not that deep into the world lore of D&D. But I was like, oh yeah, these were in there, but not knowing them, I didn't miss out on anything.
Yeah.
So.
I think one of my favorite parts was the speak with dead, just because I think anybody that's played D&D that's had a character that's been able to do that has had that situation.
Yeah. They gotta ask him, what was it, the 5 questions?
Yeah, and they dig up half the battlefield of dead barbarians.
Yeah. And the one guy, they don't ask him the question, so at the end he's just still waiting.
Yeah, it was enjoyable. I still think something like the 1982 Conan the Barbarian is a better D&D film, because I think that come back to the story that serves the story first, where you get something like if you take the game of D&D, it's taking these stories, your Lord of the Rings, your Conan, you want to go earlier, your Lord Dunsany stuff, all these works of fiction, and turning them into a game that people can collaborate and play on a tabletop. And then if you're making a D&D movie, you're taking these fictional sources, you're turning them into a game, and then you're turning them back into fiction that has to retain the flavor of the game. It's tough to do, but the new D&D movie did it pretty well.
They used to do sword and sorcery movies really well. I don't know that I remember too many recently that they did, but I mean, you go back in the day and you look at the Conan movies, Red Sonja, Beastmaster, even Clash of the Titans. There was just a lot of really good sword and sorcery movies.
There were also really bad sword and sorcery movies, but
they were good because they were bad.
Yeah. Go back and watch Hawk the Slayer. It's but by very few metrics is that a good movie, but it's still a really good time watching it.
Right. Yeah. I would like a new sword and sorcery movie that kind of hit those vibes for me. So who knows? Maybe we'll get one someday. So, well, I think that's about a show. Unless you got anything else that you want to ask Cameron, Jesse?
I think that's pretty good. This has been a fun. This has been a fun evening.
It's been a lot of fun. We
It
really
sure has.
appreciate you coming on, Cameron. Anything that you'd like to promote? Anything you got coming up that you want to talk about?
Gosh, no, just, I mean, keep looking out for stuff because, we work so far in advance at the studio. I'm working on stuff now that probably won't be announced, until closer to the end of the year, but we're on such a rapid production schedule now. It's ramped up so much over the last two to 3 years. Just, be ready. There's a lot of cool stuff coming. There's always something new coming across my desk, whether it's, mythic or cosmic or figure obscure or whatever that where we want to keep it coming and keep, people interested and happy and at a pace that's manageable for us and for, the audience, but to keep it fresh and put out as much stuff as we can. So there's a lot in the pipeline. I can't say more if I want to continue working there. And of course I do want to continue working there. So I'll just say, keep a lookout. It's all cool stuff.
That's awesome.
That's good enough for me.
Yeah. Once again, I know the lottery and everything is closed for this year for intern, but next time that it opens up again, once again, got to highly recommend putting in for that intern for a day. It's a once in a lifetime experience. Get to hang out with Cameron and Sherry and Nate and Trevor and Eric doing the sculpting. Jim takes you on the tour of the prop area. And it's just an amazing time, and everybody there is so nice. So, please do yourself a favor. If you haven't gone to intern, next time it opens up, throw your name in the hat because you will not regret it. I guarantee.
I do have to throw this out. When I was there at intern this year, and I think I told this on last week's show when I was talking about we were getting you on the show this week. My first real interaction with you, Cameron, because I wasn't in your room during the paint session, and I didn't quite know who you were even when I got there until someone was like, "Oh, that's Cameron. He's one of the painters." I was like, "Okay, cool." But that was after this moment happened. There was a couple of us sitting in the break room area, just sitting there talking, and my friend Sean, who is my +1, he was there with me, and he says something to whoever we were talking to about going to art school. You just happen to be buzzing through the room, and you just do the side over your hand, nerd, as he said art school. Everybody lost it. I was like, okay, that guy was cool.
Well, I don't remember that specifically. Yeah, it sounds like me.
And then when somebody's like, "Oh, that's Cameron. He's one of the painters." I was like, "Oh, that made that even better."
Yeah, good stuff,
guys. Thanks so much for having me on, and thanks for everybody in the comments. I'm sorry I didn't get to answer all your questions, but I'll be around.
Cool.
Right.
We're going to put you in the back and close out the show. If you need to go, you can. If you want to hang around, we'll talk to you after we close out the show, and then we'll go from there. But once again, we really appreciate you coming on. It was a lot of fun.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks. Cameron.
Well, okay. Jesse, that was another really fun show.
Yes, it was. Great guest. Anything up for you this week, Curtis? You've been doing some painting, posting some painting this week.
I have been. I'm gonna do some more painting tomorrow. At least that's the game plan. I'm gonna try to do some painting every day. So we'll see how that goes. But it's been fun getting back into it. So just remember, folks, if you have no motivation to do anything, just start. Just start, and the motivation will come. If you wait for the motivation, you're never going to get to it. So just get going. So
okay.
We do have Friday on OffWorld. I know we're going to review the Across the Spider-Verse movie. I think we're going to have a toy topic. I don't know that we've settled on that yet, but we'll have something for Friday for sure. And then next Sunday, we've got another show here like we do every Sunday. You want to tell us what we got?
Yes, sir. Next week, We've got Big Dub joining us on the shelf. So next Sunday night, 9 p.m., join us back here on the shelf for Big Dub. Recently on Jeremy's Mythic Conversations, and just an all-around cool guy. I'm sure you've seen him in the Cabal and on Instagram and stuff if you follow Legion stuff. So make sure you check out his Big Dub Squeeze It on Facebook. I think just Big Dub on Instagram.
And on YouTube, got an amazing YouTube channel.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you know, him and his family do a lot of like toy hunting and customizing and all kinds of different stuff. So check it out. It's a lot of fun. So
Absolutely.
Take a drink, everybody.
All right. There you go. All right. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next time. And as always, where's the button? What's on your shelf?
As always, where's the button?